Hi, and welcome to Tranquil Talks with Chris. This is your space where you can slow down and catch your breath from the noise and chaos of work and life, a space where you can take the time that you need to think things through clearly, and a space where I hope that you will feel supported to take just one small, intentional step forward in how you communicate and how you lead. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm so happy that we're sharing this time together. For today's episode, I wanted to stay focused on the concept of communication as an operating system. Most recently, through episodes 8 through 13 here on my podcast, I had launched a limited series to take everyone through my plant framework in full. This is the communication methodology inside of my business, Lotus Learning Sanctuary, where I help hybrid org clients essentially build and nurture a complete communication OS. PLANT stands for the 5 core or critical elements needed in order to have that. And today, as I said, I want to stay in the zone of that concept because I can appreciate that it may not be terminology or a phrase that's natural for everyone. It's not ultimately a hard concept to grasp, but I realize it may not still feel overly familiar. So with today's episode, I really want to help awaken even greater awareness about what communication OS is and why it's so important that organizations, especially hybrid organizations, take a much more holistic and systemic view to their communication. So to get us in flow, thinking about communication as an operating system, I want to start off with a reflection for you to sit with as long as you need to. So let me ask you something. Think about the last person who left your organization, someone who chose to leave voluntarily, not someone who was let go. When you thought of that last person, I want you to think about their entire employee experience with you and with your organization. From the moment they first encountered your org as a candidate, all the way through their hiring, their onboarding, their day-to-day experiences, growth, career development, performance, etc., all the way to the moment that they decided to leave and handed you their resignation. How many of those bumps in the road or pain points that they experienced, how many moments where something felt unclear or misaligned for them or disconnected, how many of those moments were actually communication problems in disguise? So maybe as you're reflecting, what's coming up is it was their job description that didn't reflect your real culture at your organization. Or perhaps for the individual that left, their onboarding experience left something to be desired. You know, they were constantly guessing about expectations, and it was quite a bumpy onboarding experience. Maybe they had a leader who kept sending mixed messages to them and to their teammates. Or ultimately, their exit came as a surprise to you and to everyone else, but to the person that was leaving. I'm here to tell you that if this is what's coming up for you, I promise you, you're not alone. Most organizations experience this kind of pattern constantly, repeatedly, and they'll respond by working to improve those individual pieces. Things like having better job descriptions or working to having more structured onboarding or, putting a stake in the ground saying, okay, we are going to work on having clear performance conversations. And yet the pattern continues to repeat because I'm here to share with you that those individual pieces aren't the problem. Or let me take that back. Let me try that again, actually. The pieces might be part of the problem, but I promise you they are not ultimately the actual root of what's the issue. The system, the operating system underneath all of that, that is what's worth paying attention to. So with that out there, I want to spend a little bit more time reaffirming what a communication operating system actually is. I'm going to start with that, and then to help keep surfacing understanding and awareness about it, I also want to take you through where your people are feeling it within their employee life cycle. For me, a former chief people officer who now is a solo business owner, HR is the playground I was in for 30 years, 35 years. So employee life cycles are my natural go-to. So I think it'll be helpful for us to look at in that context as well. But first, let's get to baseline. What is a communication operating system? Because here's the kicker. Every organization has one, whether you realize it or not. So what I see time and again is that most organizations treat communication solely as a skill, something that individuals need to get better at. And with that view, what happens is that organizations will invest in communication training, leadership development, better tools or platforms, commitments to creating clear guidelines when it comes to communication. And all of these efforts, all of these investments that organizations are making when it comes to communication are well-intentioned. And they rarely create lasting change. Because ultimately what's happening is a systems problem is being treated like an individual problem. And yes, of course, communication is a skill. That's communication as a capability is most definitely an important part of your operating system. But communication is not just a skill. It goes much broader and deeper than that. When I talk about communication OS, it's ultimately still something bigger and different. It is your underlying infrastructure that shapes how communication flows through your whole organization. So it shapes things like, shapes everything. It shapes strategy, how strategy moves from the top of your house through to your teams doing the work. It shapes how decisions get made and how they then get distributed onwards and communicated onwards across teams and your whole org. It shapes how trust either gets built or chipped away at across distance, across teams, across differences. It shapes how your people feel at every single stage of their experience inside of your org. A communication OS, when I talk about it in those terms, this is not a program that you're completing. It's certainly not a policy either. It is your full environment. It is your living environment in which everything else happens. And I know I've already said this in the episode, but it bears repeating. And it's why this concept of communication as an operating system is so important. So here's the repeat. Your organization already has a communication OS. Every organization does. So the question isn't whether you have one. It is purely whether your communication OS has been intentionally designed or not. Is it intentionally designed or simply accumulated? It almost feels like happenstance. It's just a compilation of things happening as habits and assumptions. And most organizations fall into the category where it was not intentionally designed. And if that's you, again, you're not alone. And leaders are feeling the cost of communication that's not intentionally designed. Leaders are feeling the cost in many ways. Decisions that are losing momentum or are becoming or creating very confusing within their teams. Strategies that are not landing or are landing differently. It becomes this game of broken telephone where the execution of the one core organizational strategy or strategies are happening very differently from team to team. And certainly, ultimately, you are going to feel the cost of unintentional or when communication is not intentionally designed through your people leaving who are citing culture in their exit interviews. So what will change this pattern is in fact redesigning that operating system intentionally, systematically, and at the level where communication actually lives. It lives across the entire org. It doesn't just live within the executive team. It doesn't live just within the accountability of HR to be the shepherd of all things communication. It doesn't just live within your marketing team, etc. It lives in how everything is shaped and across your entire organization. So let's now take a look at where your people are feeling it across their employee journey. And for today, I'll go through just a small handful of employee stages or life cycle touch points. So let's start with the talent attraction, talent acquisition phase. So your employees, before they even join, are experiencing your communication OS as a candidate. They're experiencing it through the job postings or your job specs that you use to attract them into your organization. They're experiencing it through your interview process, the clarity of your expectations, the responsiveness of your hiring team. When the OS is healthy here in this phase, this stage, your employees, candidates at this stage, they are arriving into your process, your interview, your talent acquisition process with an accurate picture of your culture, your expectations, and what working with you will actually feel like. And it's going to state the obvious, but when it's not a healthy operating system, the opposite happens, right? They're arriving with a version of your org that does not match reality. They do not have a clear, accurate picture of culture, expectations, what working is actually going to feel like. And that gap or that dissonance, that starts right from day one, and that carries forward in their relationship, which then segues to the next phase of the employee journey, the onboarding piece, the onboarding phase. This is where your communication OS makes its most lasting first impression. Because we know onboarding isn't just logistics. It's really the moment when a new person learns how communication actually works in your organization. The person learns what they're absorbing, they're observing, they're learning what gets said explicitly, and then what gets assumed. They're learning and seeing how information flows or doesn't flow, who has access to what, how decisions are getting made and communicated. A well-designed communication OS will make that new person feel that sense of inclusion and belonging, connection. It will help them feel very clear about where they fit within days or weeks at most. Whereas a poorly designed communication OS will leave them working to scramble or piece together this guidebook or this set of expectations that keep feeling like this moving target, and they're moving through with chaos and confusion and trial and error. And reflecting on some of the clients that I've supported over these last few years, some of their people never fully recovered from a rough, bumpy, confusing onboarding experience. All right, we looked at the candidate stage. We're exploring onboarding. It obviously shows up certainly in your day-to-day work and in leadership. Quite frankly, the day-to-day work, the day-to-day moments, and leadership together, this is where your communication operating system lives most constantly. I know I'm stating the obvious, but it bears saying, it bears emphasizing. Your communication OS lives and breathes in the everyday moments of meetings and messages and decisions and all interactions. It lives and breathes in how leaders are communicating strategy, how teams are navigating disagreement, how information is reaching people at the times they need it, in the channels that they need them. And again, it's showing up in how trust is being built or how it's being eroded across hybrid environments. And I want to share that the day-to-day moments, the leadership moments, this is where the plant framework does its deepest work, because communication patterns become culture in the day-to-day. It's in the small, consistent, repeated moments and patterns and actions where things really take root for communication. It's not in these big, splashy, huge milestone transformations. It's in the small, consistent day-to-day moments that get repeated. Let's look at a couple more stages before we round out our time together. Let's look next at growth and development. So when we think about a person's growth, a person's development, how does your organization communicate that? How does it manage development conversations? Are they clear? Are they forward focused? Are they consistent? Or do they happen more sporadically? Or do they happen in that formal once a year performance review? When a communication OS, a strong, healthy communication OS, supports growth. And with that, people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued. And that is ultimately the North Star that every org is looking to work towards, making sure people feel seen, heard, valued, and know that they're making a difference. So a strong communication OS helps people understand where they're headed, what's expected of them, how their contributions are connecting to something larger. And certainly when a communication OS is not strong, when it's not clearly supporting one's growth or development, your talented people are reaching conclusions that growth simply isn't available in your org. And obviously they're going to start looking elsewhere. And often quietly under the radar until it's too late, right? Until they hand you their resignation. Let's now go to the final piece of an employee's journey, transitions and exits. How people leave tells you something important about your communication OS. And I'm curious, when someone exits your organization, how much of what they share in their exit interview was said for the first time? I know, in theory, no one should ever be surprised. That's HR 101, right? Any conversation you have with someone, they shouldn't feel blindsided. You shouldn't feel blindsided. That's the theory. But I got to tell you, I see it all the time, even to current day, that even in exit interviews, a leader or an HR person, whoever's doing the exit interview, is still surprised by things that they hear. They're hearing stuff for the first time. And that's important to stay aware of, because if something's been building for a while and was unspoken, that's a data point. That's telling you that your system, Your operating system, your living environment is not making it safe enough to surface concerns earlier. Whereas a healthy communication OS creates enough psychological safety, enough of the honest dialogue that helps to surface concerns while they're still solvable, not at the exit interview when we know it's already much too late. So, covered quite a lot today in today's episode. I'm hoping that between my limited series going through the plant framework, again, episodes 8 through 13, if you wanted to return to them or go check them out for the first time, hoping between that and today, you're walking away feeling more connected to what a communication operating system is. And really to help support you even further, I want to leave you, before we wrap up, with a reflection or an experiment that you can try as soon as you feel ready to try, as early as this week. And as always, I'm not here about rushing people and pressuring anyone to fix things and to do things right away. Feel free to sit with this reflection, with this experiment, and don't feel you have to answer it quickly. So here it is. Let me cue it up. I invite you to pick one stage of the employee journey in your organization. You can choose whichever stage you want. Perhaps you'll feel called to choose the one that felt most uncomfortable as you were listening to today's episode. You know, if you listen to one of those stages going, oh man, we're not doing so well here, you may want to pick that one. However, pick whichever one stage of the employee journey you want in your org. And then once you've identified that employee stage, ask yourself, what would either a new person joining or a longer tenured team member experience at that stage in terms of communication, clarity, connection, and alignment? Think again, as you think about the one stage of the employee journey that you've chosen, you're thinking about what a new person or a longer tenured person would experience at that stage when it comes to communication, clarity, connection, and alignment. Ask yourself further, is what they experience, is it the result of intentional design or not? How intentional have we been in designing that experience for them or not? Again, you do not need to fix everything at once. Now, if you are naturally wired to do just that, by all means, you do you. But this is all about a space that is slowing down, catching our breath, thinking through things. And I really invite you just to begin to see that phase, that employee stage, more clearly. Why? Because clarity is always where a healthier communication OS begins. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I'm honored to have been able to share more about a communication operating system. I know that your org's communication OS is already shaping how your people feel, how your strategy is moving, and whether your best people are staying. The only question now is whether your communication OS is doing that by design or by default. If today's episode sparked something within you, if you found yourself thinking about a particular stage of your employee journey where communication could be stronger, I'd love to hear from you. And as part of today's episode in the show notes, I'm going to add a link where you can explore with me what an intentional communication OS design could look like for your org. Completely complimentary, no pressure. I'm going to offer a link to my calendar where we can have a communication debrief, and I would love genuinely to connect with you. Until next time, please continue to take good care of yourself. I hope you have a good rest of your week and continue to know that here at Tranquil Talks, you are always welcome here and you belong. Cheers.